This bulletin proudly brought to you in association with Alex Campbell's Menswear.
Kia ora, good evening. Welcome to the South today. I'm Daryl Baser. New Zealand has been in level 4 lockdown to stop the spread of the coronavirus known as COVID-19 for nearly a month. During that time, essential services including healthcare, supermarkets, service stations and media have been operating, while the rest of the nation has been closed. It's been tough on all aspects of society, but it seems we're nearly through it. We at Allied Press thank you for your viewership and readership and understanding at this time as New Zealand enters its last weekend at level 4. At this afternoon's media announcement, Finance Minister Grant Robertson says the economic ripples from COVID-19 are strong, with thousands of people applying for benefits in the last month.
As we move towards Anzac weekend, I want to take another opportunity to thank New Zealanders for their extraordinary efforts in helping us position ourselves to be able to control COVID-19. This weekend is a chance to reflect and acknowledge the sacrifices that have been made by those in wartime. It is also a chance to reaffirm our commitment to one another that we will get through this crisis together. Our ongoing vigilance for the remainder of level 4 and for level 3 are critical to successfully finishing the job that we have all collectively started. Today, I want to talk briefly about the changes we can expect to see in the economy as we move into level 3 next week, and how this shift fits within the government's wider economic response to the impacts of COVID-19. Our economic plan to respond and recover consists of 3 waves. The first, fighting the virus and cushioning the blow. The second, positioning for recovery and kickstarting the economy. And the third, resetting and rebuilding our economy. The first wave has obviously been underway for some time. The best economic response to the virus was always going to be a strong public health response. And that's why our strategy from the start has been to go hard and go early. Getting the virus under control now means we can get our economy back to normal sooner and ahead of many other countries who continue to experience the devastating effects of the virus. We've put in place a safety net for as many Kiwis as we can. We can see the impact in the numbers that are part of our weekly economic update released today. Applications for the job seeker benefit have lifted by 30,000 since the 20th of March. This is a distressing time for all of those people. We have to bear in mind, though, that this represents less than 1% of our total population and is dwarfed by the 1.6 million people who are being supported by the wage subsidy scheme.
And stay tuned to Channel 39 to see today's full announcement. Earlier this week, the South Today brought you footage of flooding in St Leonards after heavy rains last Saturday. Since then, the Dunedin City Council has set contractors to work to fix the cause of the problem.
Last Saturday's heavy rain in Dunedin saw fire crews attending stormwater erupting out of a blocked drain at the edge of Stephen Harwood's property in Moa Street in St Leonards. 4 days later, contractors were busy on site installing a temporary pump as well as excavating to unblock the stormwater drain.
The response here has been awesome. They've been helpful, explaining everything. They've been terrific, the whole lot, all of them.
Harwood says he first alerted the council to problems with the drain after a similar incident in February.
They first up on the footpath, and when I rang them, they told me to bring a plumber. So I got on to my councillor, Steve Walker, and he got the ball rolling, which has been absolutely incredible. What they've done from there on in.
The Dunedin City Council says it had planned to work on the drain earlier, but was delayed with the lockdown. Given what happened on Saturday, the work has become essential.
Oh, it's good entertainment while you're locked down, isn't it? It's nice and easy. Get up and get company all day. Don't have to talk to the wife all day.
The DCC is still to confirm what caused the blockage and what work still needs to be done. It's thought the whole process could take a minimum of 2 to 3 weeks. In Dunedin, the South Today.
Tomorrow is Anzac Day, a day in which returned service personnel and their families come together and remember fallen relatives, friends and more. With the country still at level 4 lockdown, all Anzac commemorations have been cancelled. But Dunedin RSA President Lox Kellis says there are many ways we can remember them. Firstly, it's Anzac Eve. We're facing tomorrow's dawn without a dawn service. How is that for you?
Well, I think it's a different take completely. It's never occurred before in my career, and I've been attending Anzac Day services for a very long time, so it's most unusual. So I think we've just got to do a different take this time, Daryl, and come up with some innovative ideas so that we can still recall the day.
It seems like a sombre reflection of the times, like as we're all doing our best to fight the COVID. What have other veterans said to you about services being cancelled?
Well, they have said they have disappointed, but at the same time, they accept the fact that we have to do this to fight the COVID, because many of them that I've served with overseas have said to me that it's normally a day to get together, have a bit of a yarn, a chat, and talk about old times and new times and family. So it'll be different for them as well, and like we are now, they're relying on technology to communicate with their cobbers from their past service career.
Indeed. So how can people in general remember those who have served?
Well, I think under the current circumstances, Darryl, is that it's the ODT have produced a large poppy. They can take and hang on the gate. The children can do something, but for people to go down to their gate in the morning and just pause and reflect and remember those that have served from their family or relations, and also at this particular time, also remember those people on the front line at the moment that are fighting the COVID virus, like all the medical personnel. So it's a war footing for them, and we have to think about them at the time as well.
What does it mean to you that people are making the effort to remember vets in whatever way possible this year?
Well, I think this year especially it's quite challenging because normally people go to a service and stand together and have catch-up. This time there's restrictions. So I think people just may sort of perhaps pause longer, or perhaps they may engage with their neighbours across the street, which they perhaps haven't done before, and perhaps exchange stories within a safe bubble. And I hope that they do that.
What can you tell us about other commemorations around the region? We know the ODT is doing the poppy tomorrow, but what have you heard about other centres around Otago?
Well, some of the small rural areas will be conducting perhaps services of their own. There's no official sanctioned services by the RSA throughout the district, but I do know in some areas that they're going to place a wreath or a posy on a war cemetery or war memorial. Some may elect to go to the family member's grave that served in a conflict and place a posy on there. But other than that, there's nothing really planned for the province apart from what people are doing in their own bubble throughout the district.
So there are no official services at the cenotaph in Dunedin, but are people still welcome to add poppies, etc., to the cenotaph during the day?
Well, again, if it's within the criteria of the restrictions, I'm comfortable with that. But as long as they observe, the spacing, and that they are in a position where they can do that safely.
How will you be spending your Anzac Day tomorrow?
Well, it'll be an early start as per usual. So I normally have a reasonable breakfast every Anzac Day. This year it'll be at the gate. I'll be listening to see if anybody's playing the last post and reveille, and then home back in the house for a standard rum and coffee, what we call recuperating oil, and just phone a couple of friends in the North Island that I serve with overseas. So that's my plan.
Sounds like an excellent way to remember. Thank you very much for your time, Lox. I really appreciate it. As we've just mentioned on the South Today, Anzac Day is being commemorated differently for the first time due to COVID-19 restrictions. Tim Miller caught up with historian George Davis to talk Anzac over the years.
In the absence of a traditional Anzac Day service, I'm talking to historian Dr. George Davis about the history of the day and what's changed since it was first marked in 1916. Welcome, Dr. Davis. Thanks for joining us today.
Nice to see you, Tim.
With the cancellation of Anzac Day services and parades and that sort of thing tomorrow, has there been another period in the history of the day that this has happened before?
Well, not that I know of. There have been many times when there's been great strain. It was possible, for example, that the Anzac Day might have been called off, but hasn't been. For example, as we've discussed previously, the influenza pandemic, 1918-19, but it carried on here in Otago, Southland, throughout New Zealand. Beginning of World War II, I had some concern about the fact that World War II might throw up an Anzac Day that was difficult because of the departure of troops, but that didn't happen. And the debates of the 1960s and 70s over the Vietnam War, they were a very contentious period, but again, did not throw up a cancellation of any sort.
For a lot of people, I guess there's been a resurgence of the interest in Anzac Day in recent years, but I guess the day's evolved a bit from when it was first held. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What's changed since those first early days?
Well, the day has evolved enormously. It was created. It was created, firstly, if you want to go back more than a century to 1916, it was created by what I would call the intolerable sorrow resulting from the Gallipoli campaign. There had been previous deaths in the Western Front trenches, but the Gallipoli campaign was the first one which really struck Australasia in a big sense for both Australia and New Zealand. The non-repatriation of the dead and the return of those others with horrific injuries and illness, it created an enormous gulf which a day of commemoration could only partially fulfill, but it was seen as a palliative by the leading members of society to obviate the terrible distress that rapidly arose, particularly in New Zealand society. I suppose in a funny sort of way, we might have felt it more here because we were so far away from the centre of power, which was at that stage, of course, London. But of course, it soon moved on the political platform and was used to unify the country response to both the war and post-war recovery. And fairly early on, the changes began to be reflected in parades. Like, for example, one of the ones that I quite like is parades in Australia and New Zealand began to be headed by nurses who were dressed in the then traditional red cape, and also by the injured and ill were leading in the procession, taken in cars that were donated, and these people were placed sometimes in open cars and given great applause by the onlookers. But today, and so back then, you have mostly veterans who dominated the parades, and RSA and RSL in Australia both led the parades. While today, the old veterans, even World War II veterans, sparsely occupy the front rows of remembrance ceremonies, followed by ranking officers within the current military forces. So there's been a sea change, both in terms of personnel and in terms of women and officers in the ranks present, which was not evident a century ago. And also foreign nationals. For example, there was a great debate in Australia over whether or not there should be Turkish representation. And that debate raged during the 1970s, particularly in Victoria and Australia. And there have been other changes as well in some parades, particularly in country areas, children are allowed in as well. So the Anzac Day itself has maintained the same pattern of early morning dawn service since the late 1920s, 1930 period, and then followed by a gathering together of returned service people, and then often with a breakfast, and then later in the afternoon a meeting, a sort of a knees up. And in the evening in New Zealand, they used to have smoke concerts, but they have, for obvious social reasons, have passed beyond the pale, as it were, and things have changed. So there have been huge changes since 1916.
And have those changes been in both Australia and New Zealand? Is there a bit of a difference in the way that both countries see the day and commemorate the day?
There is a difference. The basic difference has often been described as the sorrow that's more evident in New Zealand ceremonies than in Australian ceremonies, where you see a great deal more celebrations, a lot more hoopla in Australia, particularly if you go to a place like Canberra, where I've been a few times. And in New Zealand, it seems to be a quieter day, a quieter service. In Australia, New Zealanders like to think that the element of larrikinism pervades things in Australia, especially ever since the 1981 Gallipoli film, and which was evident of Western Australian light horse going onto the Gallipoli trenches and all the things that happened there and what soldiers got up to in Egypt. But I'm not sure that sort of bully boy, larrikinism, mates alone, drinking up big, two up, and all that kind of thing, was any more evident in Australia than it is here. I'm not sure what happened to I see. My daughter, who's in the Air Force, has just rung me on FaceTime, so she's going to have to wait. Anyway, the big thing that was often emphasised with Australia was this ideal of mateship and people together. I don't think that was any less so in New Zealand. And also the other thing that used to be emphasised amongst the Australians was the country aspect. That is, you find these guys on horses and tearing around the country and getting into World War I and leading charges at places like Beersheba. But Australia was more perhaps urbanised than New Zealand was in that period. So most of the soldiers in both countries came from a small town through to city atmosphere rather than the country as we would normally think of it. So there are some differences. It's much more it seems to be more informal in New Zealand, apart from, say, in Wellington or up at Waihuru, whereas in places like Canberra, it is very official. You sit in particular places. You listen to addresses. You go to church services which are dominated by the official name church of that particular day.
And this might be a little tricky to answer, but historians in the future, when they're looking back at this year's commemorations, do you think that will give them an idea of what the day meant? We're in the middle of this pandemic, people are locked down, but people are still, going out to their letterboxes, that sort of thing. Will it give an idea of what they, shine a little bit of light on the day itself, even during times of crisis like that?
Well, I think it's true what you've said. It will shine a bit of light on the day in the sense of the symbols of Anzac, like the poppy, are being well touted at the moment. But what there won't be will be the parades. There simply won't be the parades in the form that they are normally there. I think, however, the very fact that New Zealand and Australia will, and the Australian War Memorial has put out a program for the day, if you look on the memorial site, Australia and New Zealand will remember Anzac Day. They will remember this day as being particularly different, but they will still commemorate the day. I think there's been what I would call a sea change in the attitude of young people towards Anzac Day. Young people, families, and often people between 20 and 30 who gone on some overseas trips have been enormously impressed by the kind of material that's been put around both by the governments of Australia and New Zealand and by the government of Turkey in relation to going on journeys to Gallipoli. And that has changed, I think, the perception, both through the media, particularly through not just print media, but through the television medium, has changed young New Zealanders' perception of what actually happened in World War One, and created a spirit of inquiry, which I don't think will go away. I don't think this year will change that. I think young people are interested in finding out what happened, not only to their own direct relatives, but to what happened in the people in their own township or city in New Zealand in the period of World War One. There's been a resurgence, I think, of interest in World War One, partly driven along by all the promotion given to it between 2014 and 2018.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Davis, for your time today. Much appreciated.
With Anzac commemorations set to begin at dawn tomorrow, New Zealand Army soldiers have been busy in Canterbury, sprucing up gravestones. Names carved decades ago will stand out clearly again after soldiers, volunteers and veterans restored headstones in the services section at Bromley Cemetery.
We've got a group of young soldiers from Burnham Camp who are giving dignity back to these headstones of former service personnel who have deceased. So from all aspects of our combat history. There's a headstone being fixed up over here before, and it's from Egypt right up until World War II, Vietnam, and of course Malaya, World War I. So from all aspects of our combat history. Age has just worn them out, age has deteriorated them, and they just need a good spruce up to restore their dignity so that the inscriptions can be read and respected. The New Zealand Remembrance Army have been doing this for some time, but it's good that it does coordinate with Anzac Day here in Bromley Cemetery. It'll be a nice place to come to on Anzac Day to recognise those who've served their country for our freedom.
With Level 4 lockdown still in place, the need to pay respect to and honour the sacrifices of service personnel is going digital. Allied Productions has produced a special program which is set to screen as a digital dawn service at 6 a.m. Anzac Day morning. With New Zealand's lockdown continuing till early next week, no public gatherings for Anzac Day can take place. So Allied Productions and Channel 39 have produced a digital dawn service. Set to screen first at 6 a.m, the special program is due to be repeated during the day, as well as being available online at this web address. The program follows the order of service which would normally take place at the Cenotaph in Queen's Gardens. Dunedin RSA President Lox Callis will give an introduction and read the ode, followed by a prayer and benediction from Aaron Knotts. Logan Park High School's head girl is due to read, before Matai McGinty reads the ode in Te Reo Māori. Dunedin opera singer Sophie Morris sings both the New Zealand and Australian national anthems. There will also be footage from past Anzac Day commemorations. In Dunedin, the South Today. Time now for a look at the weather.
Tonight's weather proudly brought to you by Mole Map.
Beginning with the situation, a cold front brings brief southwesterly change tomorrow, but showers will clear later in the day. Sunday will be milder as the northwesterly airflow increases ahead of the next cold front due on Monday. In the southern towns, the Catlins, Balclutha, Lumsden and Gore all have fresh southwesterlies and showers clearing and should all reach 13 degrees. Heading across to the Central Lakes, Wanaka and Queenstown are set for decreasing southwesterlies and showers clearing with 14 degrees. Alexandra is similar but one warmer on 15, while Te Anau can expect decreasing southwesterlies becoming fine and 13 degrees. The northern towns on the coast are the place to be tomorrow. Timaru and the Waimaru are due for southwesterly changes and some cloud. Timaru heads for 18 and Oamaru 17 degrees. while inland Twizel and Omarama are both in line for fresh westerlies, brief showers and 16 degrees. In Dunedin it'll be cloudy tonight with an overnight low of 10 degrees. High cloud and mild northerly winds arrive tomorrow morning, but expect cloud and brief light showers developing around the middle of the day with a colder southwesterly change. You should have a high of 17 and a low of 6 degrees. It'll be mostly cloudy and cool on Sunday with moderate northeasterlies, a high of 14 and a low of 10 degrees. Heading to Invercargill, rain tonight with fresh gusty southwesterlies developing at an overnight low of 11 degrees. Showers clearing during the morning tomorrow with sunny periods increasing later in the day. A high of 13 and a low of 6 degrees. It'll be milder on Sunday with cloud increasing and a northwesterly wind becoming strong and gusty. Expect a high of 16 and a low of 11 degrees. And that's all from the South Today team for this Friday and indeed for the week. For the latest news from the southern region, head online to odt.co.nz and follow Channel 39 on Facebook and YouTube. And stay tuned to Channel 39 for the latest COVID-19 updates from the government. It's Anzac Day tomorrow, and in the morning we will remember them. Ka kite anō. See you on Tuesday.
This bulletin proudly brought to you in association with Alex Campbell's Menswear.
Supporting local content so you can see more of New Zealand on air.